Hi, Rose.
Hey there, Nuala. Hi.
Hi, good to see you.
It's great to see you. It's been so long.
I know, ages. This is Paul.
Hi, Paul. Rose. I'm Rose. Nice to meet you.
Rose is a plein air painter who lives in the Netherlands. Yeah. So Rose goes out in all kinds of weather.
You would have been very impressed with Saturday's weather then.
Oh, really? Was it stormy for the group?
Stormy and wet.
Oh,
we were nicely indoors, so we didn't get wet, but lots of energy and power in the sky.
Yeah. No, I love going to Ballycastle to paint because it is just so amazing, the light there and how quickly it changes. It's just beautiful. But really, Nuala, you're studying, I'm sorry, I don't remember all the terms and stuff. You're studying of all the work with the color and the light. So Paul, I read a little bit about your bio, but I have to admit evenings, it's 8 o'clock in the evening for me is when my brain starts to kind of do hiccups, so I can't remember anything. But you're a physicist, correct?
Yeah, my background is in physics, and I'm very interested in communicating physics. And myself and Nuala, we met, was it 2 years ago, Nuala? Was it two summers ago?
Yeah, it was.
Or was it 3? It was 3.
It was 2019.
Okay, and we met in Waterford, which is down in the bottom right-hand corner of the country, at the Robert Boyle summer school.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So I'm on the organizing committee of that summer school. So, and Nuala kindly exhibited, I don't know how many pieces you had. You had quite a few. Is there 12 or so? Was there that many? Yeah, and of work that you were influenced by Robert Boyle. So we're members of the mutual Robert Boyle fan club anyway. I'm coming at it from the scientific viewpoint, and Nuala's coming from the artistic viewpoint. So yeah, Robert Boyle has a lot to say about a lot of things. Have you heard of him, Rose?
Well, I heard of him through Nuala. I happened to make a little studio visit with her in 2019, and I saw that wonderful book that she was like plowing through, and I just was, yeah.
And Nuala has it probably
and also
close
books
to hand.
with the color.
Oh, that one.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. And I was just gobsmacked, kind of going, "Oh my, Nuala, that sounds incredible. It looks incredible." And then I had to return to the Netherlands. So I'm sure if I was in Ireland, I'd have been following her around like a puppy, wanting to learn more. But yeah, I don't know much about Robert Boyle, the father of modern chemistry, I guess.
Yeah, although Paul, you were extrapolating on that. He's more of a physicist than a chemist.
Well, I suppose in the 1600s, it was natural philosophy, where there was probably no distinction between physics, chemistry, and biology. But yeah, he's been labeled the father of chemistry. But he's responsible for lots of things, not just kind of color theory and light theory, but simple things like the fact that before Robert Boyle, people just had theories and they didn't really verify them with experiment. And Robert Boyle was one of the first to actually suggest, well, let's design experiments to test out and to change the hypothesis to an actual theory. And he was involved with setting up the Royal Society in London, which was a very learned body at the time. But so the idea that science now records and observes everything, because you never really know what's going to happen in an experiment, and you may just stumble across something. So it's important to record things and to observe. But with things like spectra from different elements that we use in astronomy, that's down to Boyle, and he used flowers to test acids and bases. And he did quite a bit of work in developing the first safety match. So some very useful things. But yeah, there's quite a litany of, he was a real thinker, a polymath, and he was very much interested in people's health, and also how it might be possible to live to 100, because obviously in the 1600s, you know, if you turned 40, you were probably doing quite well.
Yeah.
So yeah, he wrote a lot about a lot of things.
Sounds fascinating. I want to dig into his work more now.
This book that I've been working from, the Experiments and Considerations Touching Colours, just because I am interested in colours more than vacuums and things like that. That he's Boyle's law, but it's a series. The Considerations is where he's, you know, telling little stories at the beginning of each chapter about why he's interested in things, or things he's observed, or things that people have told him. And then it just goes into experiment after experiment on the nature of color and blackness and whiteness, and, you know, also, and there's just one after another. And there, you know, he is doing things with chemicals, in that he's changing, you know, one substance to make it a different color, or he's examining why that might happen, you know. And there's all these great sort of alchemical, you know, names for things. There's aqua regis and vitriol, which is a copper sulfate, and
that sounds wonderful.
entrums and sulfurs and things like that, all those base materials that alchemists talk about. So the language is quite lovely. But you know, he talks about darkened rooms and enlightened rooms.
Wow.
He has big curtains, and, you know, assistants helping him with different kinds of colored glass to put them together. So, and he talks about painters in the book as well. He professes not to know much about it, but he'll talk about how different colors mix in different, you know, like in steel, or the rainbow. I mean, what got me initially was the rainbows and the description of froth, and how, you know, how, you know, really looking into whether the object contains the color or not, and what's a fugitive color or an emphatical color. So,
really wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess as a painter, plein air painter, since I'm always looking at, you know, natural light and real light, and I'm also interested in the science behind it, really, or you know, the light theory. I did a lot of studying of Joseph Itten and Albers when I was in school, and also when I was teaching myself how to mix colors. And it took me a while to figure out that pigment works so differently, which is chemicals, I guess, minerals, than light. So yeah, I'm fascinated with that too, all those rainbows that you have there to start with.
Itten was mentioned the other day on Saturday. There was somebody who was at the workshop, so I have it on my list of people to look up. But yeah, Paul, we had a big discussion on Saturday about rainbows, didn't we?
Yeah, and rainbows are amazing, and they I suppose they signify so much in folklore and everything. I suppose I threw up a slide that said that looked at the angles involved and a process called total internal reflection. And I hope during the workshop I didn't kind of burst anyone's bubble. That they were
I
so
love that. Total, did you say total internal reflection? That sounds really awesome.
yeah, that rainbows are so magical. Yeah, and you know, both Newton and Boyle were very interested with them. And I don't know, in that book you have, Nuala, does it mention Robert Hooke, the other Robert?
I believe it does. I mean, I know he was working with him.
Yeah, because he was one of Robert Boyle's assistants, and he actually gave really good credit to Robert Hooke. And of course, Robert Hooke developed one of the very first microscopes. And I don't know if you've seen any of his prints or line drawings of fleas and the hairs on the fleas' legs, like
Oh,
fantastic stuff altogether, dating back from the 1600s. But yeah, the process for rainbows is you need a couple of things. You need sunlight, you need rain, and you need the sun to your back. And the angles involved, 42 degrees is a very important angle, because if the light strikes the interior of the raindrop at an angle of 42 degrees or so, it's actually bent back out. And when it's bent back out, we get that total internal reflection and the splitting up into the colors of the spectrum. And we talked briefly on Saturday as well about double rainbows. And that's rain that's further away. And the angle involved there is 51 degrees. So, you know, I suppose it is the physicist coming out in me, you know, we like to be able to measure or calculate things, but
would saying quantify things be a good word to use?
Yeah. And I have an image taken from an airplane. I didn't take it myself, but you can see the full circular effect of a rainbow. So if you're lucky enough to be in an airplane and to see, you can actually see a full rainbow, and it's a complete circle, which is quite amazing. I've seen rainbows from aircraft, but never the full circle.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I love that idea of you know, that all the colors, you know, comprise white light, and when we look through water, you can see the different spectrums. I work here in Holland a lot at this really low-lying sea that's very shallow, so there are a lot of salt crystals in the water. And because our skies are also so low, you get this like double, you know, reflection and all that light bouncing off of those sea crystals. And yeah, so the light here is completely different from the light that I see in Ballycastle and Ballinglen or in Northern Ireland. Yeah, so I wish I was a physicist so I could really like say, you know, talk about what I see, because as an artist, it's hard to talk about visual things.
But this was one of the things that we actually did discuss on Saturday, in that if you're curious to know how something works, that's okay, and you don't really need the full theoretical background. If you can, you know, if you get a sense, like there's lots of equations and formulas, and but they're not really needed, you know, they're not needed at all. So if you just have a sense of what's happening, and Nuala, you've really, I think, excelled in that. You've got a great curiosity into the science behind what you're painting.
Yeah, because, well, you see, I have a particular bugaboo at the moment, and I haven't really talked about it yet, so I hope I'll be able to explain. But there are a lot of things that, given the age I am, I'm not that old yet, but I'm not young either. So there are things that I know, but I don't have a way of explaining them, or I don't have a way of, and there are things that are known in painting, or say in like Buddhism or something like that, that haven't been studied scientifically, or perhaps haven't been studied scientifically, and or I don't have the scientific explanation for them yet. And sometimes when you don't, it goes into the realm of like woo-woo, or something that's a sort of a subjective experience, and not shared, or not worth something. Like we live in a world where you know, the scientific proof has become a sort of a gold stamp on things. And so part of my curiosity is just part of the way I've always been. I've always stood somewhere, you know, and wondered why something worked the way it did, or looked the way it did. So, but now I'm getting more curious, like what is happening when light, what is happening, what is light, what's happening to light, what happens when it enters my eye, what happens what happens after it enters my eye, what happens in my brain. Why does, you know, the thought of a lemon cause, you know, this sort of your saliva glands to do that thing? And what happens when you're in a green forest, you know, and you start to feel a sense of well-being? Could those things be actually converted into a painting and used in a particular way? I mean, I'm sure that's already happening anyway, because, you know, it's well known, and it's public policy now to use art as a tool for human beings' well-being. And, you know, and not just in extreme cases, but in, you know, in the cases of, you know, helping them, you know, feel good and feel connected. So I'm interested in sort of joining a few dots, you know, seeing what research is out there, and how maybe research into vision in abnormal circumstances could be joined with research into, you know, the way of things are, as in physics, and see if those things can be joined with other bits of research. So I'm on a big, wide-ranging sort of exploration at the moment. You know, and I find consciousness, always have found consciousness to be an intriguing thing, especially as, you know, as a Buddhist studier of the mind, or trainer of the mind, to just, and watching how it works, you know, just to see what the science is around it, you know.
Yeah.
And I love going back to Boyle, because he's doing what I think us painters, Rose, what we do is observe and document, you know, and question, ask why something is, or what something is. And Paul, you just have a way of explaining things that make it possible for me to be able to understand them in a way that I never have been before.
Well, as Einstein once said, explain things simply, but not too simple.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, the physiological responses to art, and I suppose now with modern techniques and MRI scans of the brain, and lots more research in the whole area of neuroscience, that's all opening up. So whereas art, the response to art, and I don't want to make this kind of clinical or too quantitative, but the response to images can now be seen in the actual brain.
Yeah.
And that kind of links in with the whole area of well-being. We've all known for a long time, you know, that you can have a response to a piece of art, but now this is, you know, it's can be seen the actual response can be seen in the brain, which is fantastic. So yeah, like the whole area of neuroscience as well is opening up. You know, it's the joined up that you talked about, joining up the dots, like no area exists in isolation, including, say, the sciences and the humanities and the human response as well.
Yeah, and you know, and I don't believe, you know, I believe the time is now, and I think it's because we have the technology to examine these things. You know, I know there are a lot of artists working in this realm. You know, there's David Beattie's working with the Royal College of Surgeons. He's an Irish artist, and I'm going to forget all the names of the people working. You know, but there are a lot of art, science, university collaborations happening, and I think I'm just tapping into the zeitgeist of that, you know, and realizing also too that I've always wondered about these things, and just like how I always wanted to make films, but it became so much easier when the digital camera was invented. You know, I can now do it at home, you know, whereas when I was a child, there was too much, you know, reliance on other people to be able to do it. But now that the technology is here for this research, I think it's fabulous. It's very interesting, you know. Yeah. And I wonder what Robert Boyle would make of all of this, you know. I just got his, when you said that he was interested in medicine and people's health and well-being. Well, I just got Michelle DeMio's book about Lady Ranelagh, who's his sister. And in reading something she'd previously published, I believe that Robert and his sister were using their resources, because they were quite wealthy. They were using their resources to gather and examine and already, you know, sort of old recipes or old formulas for medicine, and then they were able to buy the chemicals and then use the lab to do experiments on these, and then be able to publish or you know, or go out into the public and use the ones that were effective, you know. So he was a medical researcher, and I believe Lady Catherine was doing the work with him.
Yeah, I think they lived closely together in England for about 14 years or so, and she was a great influence on him. And you're right, she was very much, I would say, a scientific herbalist, really, because that driving thought of you know, where's the evidence? Is this working, or is it, you know, a placebo effect? So yeah, lots of evidence that she did create loads of medicines. And you know, the little bit that I know of his sister, the Lady Ranelagh, you know, she sounds like a fantastic, interesting person as well. So yeah, that should be a good read. Rose, by the way, this year's summer school was all online because of COVID, but all the sessions were recorded. So we might organize to send you a link to those, that if you are kind of interested in anything, that you can actually. And Michelle actually gave a talk, the author, on. She's probably the expert on the Lady Ranelagh. She's fantastic. But yeah.
Oh, I'd love to receive that link.
Yeah. So there was a couple of really good sessions, and it was all online this year. So yeah.
I might just share my screen because I have the fantastic an image of the fantastic
lovely.
that is outside the Taoiseach's office of Robert Boyle, and I find him looking quite suave here.
Wow! Yes.
Yeah.
Very elegant.
So yes, and then this was this was a painting I did before I met Robert Boyle. I had been reworking a painting and heard Robert's head. And so then when I was listening to, I've told this story before, but when I was listening to the radio in the car, News Talk, Owen Gill was, who's one of your co-founders of the foundation or co-organizers of the summer school, he was talking about Robert Boyle. I was like, oh, I must look him up. Maybe it's his head. So,
Wow.
yeah.
You're very guided, Una.
So
Nuala.
here's the two light mixtures. This would be my preferred, usually my preferred triangle of color mixtures. But now I'm going to have to switch over to this one, because the one on the left is how color mixes and the light mixes, and then the other one is how paint mixes. So I just thought you mentioned.
It's great to see the two together,
isn't it? Because they are using the same colors. It's just the order is different, and I'm trying to make sense of it. I mean, you know, you demonstrated it, Paul, very well by putting, you know, the red or the green and the blue lights, shining them together, and the cyan, there it was, it popped out so absolutely. So like, I believe you because I've seen it, but just as a painter,
what Robert Boyle would say.
Yeah. But just as a painter, it's so antithetical, you know. It's you know, if you mix green and blue together, you're just not going to get that, you know.
Yeah, as you've got there, it is a different process, and the intensities, and that was interesting to hear you talk about that in with the paint as well. The intensities make a huge difference as well.
Yeah. Like that, it's all about proportion. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Yeah. I like to think about color as the primary and secondary are your sort of sky colors. You know, they're your prismatics. They're equal to the rainbow. And then when you mix all three primaries together, they go below the horizon, and they're the earth tones. So I do think of it in terms of the landscape when I think about color and how it gets mixed together. It kind of helps. But there's this here. So this is in the 1664 experiments and considerations. So because it is commonly held, and I've heard it so many times, about Newton discovering the splitting, but you're saying that Newton recombined the colors after they went through the prism, got split. He recombined them into white light.
Yeah, and that's why Newton is remembered for the dispersion experiment. I suppose what I've read is if you just take it that the white light is broken into the colors, it could be that the prism is adding color, or you know, that there's some effect from the prism itself, whereas what Newton did was to take that second prism, take the colors and recombine it into white light. And so by the thought process, the result is that light consists of all those colors. And it's nothing, it has obviously to do with the prism. The prism is causing the splitting, but it's not adding any color to it. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Which is an important point, you know. Yeah. But here you'll see just the nature of his writing, which has taken me some time. I mean, I think I got this book in 2016. So it, you know, and the show that of the paintings that related to it were 2019, and I think it was only even last year that, you know, that I was able to pick up the book and really get to know, you know, really understand as I'm reading a sentence. You know, it's difficult language, but it's quite beautiful.
Yeah, it's a case that, particularly if you're going to read a sentence out loud, you have to take a very large breath before you start.
Mhm.
And I have read quite a lot of them out loud because I've because I like how it sounds so much. I've recorded myself quite a few times reading these paragraphs. So these were some of the works I made related to Boyle. They were all called internulum. Another word that occurred to me, which is a non-existent word until I made it exist. These are all body paintings. He talks a lot about bodies. He talks about colored bodies, diaphanous bodies, and that's those corpuscles that you're talking about. He talks about corpuscles as well, and shining bodies. And a lot of my paintings are diaphanous and shining and colored. I've now added another body to the list, and it's antibodies. So I have these cards in the studio, so they get shuffled around. But antibodies have become really important in the last year. So yes, so these are abstract paintings based on the non-gendered body. So it's not female body, male body. It's just body in general, body of land, person, or sky, or lake, or water.
Yeah, I think the word body in Newton's and Boyle's time was object.
Yes, yeah.
Just object, really. It wasn't a human body. Yeah.
Yeah, but I like their use of body. I mean, it's a you know, object doesn't have as physical. Sometimes it doesn't have as physical a connotation as this idea of body. You know, so I like the way they've used it. But this is the same painting with light on it, with a different light on it. So you'll see I'm using the what may have appeared yellow before is actually gold, and there's silver paint, and it's all layered up. So I'll just go back one. So that's it without the light, and that's it with the light on it. So these works change depending on where they're hung or what light is shining. And so as the sun goes around the room, the work looks different. This is the last painting I made for the exhibition, and it was it achieved what I wanted to achieve. It was I had done what I had desired to do. So the this blue area up here is interference paint. So there are companies making paint now that use an internal chemistry in them to do with the iridescence. They use mica flakes and they coat them, and then the interference ones. Sorry, now I'll find the page here to tell you exactly. Well, they what they do is they try to create interferences where the top of, say, a soap bubble and the bottom of it, because of the light waves, they're slightly misaligned. And so what you can see is the light hitting different parts of this one thing. Am I saying it properly, Paul?
Yeah. There's a path difference because they have to travel slightly further.
Yeah.
And then you get an interference effect, which creates then a change in color at the right angle.
Yeah. So you'll see the angle thing here. So there is that painting from a different angle. So that interference up the top has become very blue, whereas other things have disappeared. And again, there, this area in here is now shining, the light is shining on the mica, coated mica, in a particular way so that it reflects. So I'll go back over those again. and that's it. You see, in this one, you can't see another area. So yeah. So that was what I was looking for. That's what I was going for, and made it there. The show. I love these paints. I love experimenting with these paints, and mainly because I see these phenomena around me. These are all very rooted. They're very grounded in stuff that I see. So the you know, sky, land, sea, you know, body, all of that is it has a grounding, I suppose. This was the one I was talking about the other day, where there was the orange and the turquoise, the complementary colors, how they really sort of zing off each other. It's almost uncomfortable to look at some of those turquoise lines against the background. And I find that fascinating, how those things work. And there at another angle, there's iridescent paint on that as well. Again. That's it before it was all clean. That's it on the studio wall. Yeah, so maybe I can get out of that now. Yes, fluorescence. Maybe Paul, you'd describe fluorescence and how that works.
Okay, I suppose we would see fluorescence around us quite a bit. The example that I often like to use is the gin and tonic in the nightclub. This brighter than brighter color that seems to zing away on our eyes. With the gin and tonic, it's the tonic water, it's not the gin that's creating that glow effect. And in particular, it's the quinine in the tonic water. Basically, what happens is the electrons in the atom, when you shine light on them, they absorb some of the light, and the electrons jump to a higher excited level. But this is only a very temporary situation for them. And then those electrons fall back down to their normal energy state. And when they do that, they give out the light. And the color of the light and the frequency or the wavelength of the light is indicative of the energy levels. So it's actually a method that's used in science to recognize elements, but also it indicates these energy levels, which are based on a Danish Niels Bohr. He was the scientist who came up with that particular Bohr model of the atom, which has been proved true. And fluorescence is very much a case of it in the real world. And it is possible that with some atoms, the energy gap can be so large that when they fall back, they can actually give out an X-ray. And this is how X-rays are produced. You normally have some high-speed electrons that smash into a heavy target, something like tungsten, which also has a very high melting point. And the electrons in the tungsten are promoted to those high energy level states, fall back down, but not giving out visible light this time, actually giving out X-rays. And that's how an X-ray machine works. So that's linking gin and tonic to X-rays.
I haven't actually seen I haven't actually ever seen that. I've never seen gin and tonic. But do you think because at the Ballinglen Museum at the moment, Dorothy Cross's the Stony Road Press has a 20-year anniversary show on, and Dorothy Cross has some her luminous prints. They're made with luminous inks. if I brought a gin and tonic, are we talking about the same technology?
Absolutely. Have a gin and tonic for yourself. Pour out a nice one tonight, and then your black light or your ultraviolet light.
Yes.
You know, just view that, and you'll see a beautiful glow of the gin and tonic. The same effect is with some washing powders, DAS, you know, that blue whiteness, and people's teeth as well fluoresce. So yeah, nightclubs are great places to see fluorescence, and lots of nightclubs have particular paints that respond to ultraviolet.
Yeah, I've had to, because I've been using fluorescent paint, so I've had to be careful, and I've had to use ULVS, ultra UVLS probably, varnish on top of it in order to retain the brightness, but it will get rid of that that effect. It blocks. It puts a block over it, so it allows it to remain bright without allowing it to do that shiny thing. Yeah. Yeah, I'm working on some stuff at the moment that I'm quite happy with, and yeah, abstract work. Yes. And Paul showed me a Mobius strip, so I'm thinking about that.
You remembered it, so maybe that's going to become important to you. I don't know, but
I think so.
The Mobius strip, indeed.
Yeah.
I'm just fascinated with what you're doing, and you know, I really love hearing all the explanations, Paul. I wish I could have you next to me while I'm painting to answer all those curious questions. But yeah, I did a lot of study of Joseph Itten's work and how to really translate how we see light into how to mix with the pigments in order to mimic, you know, natural light, and actually get beyond that and how it resonates in us. I'm also very interested in, I guess, for lack of words, spirituality, the sublime that we see in nature, and also how that is more and more being explained, and forgive me for being such a lay person, through the physicists, through all of the experiments that you're doing with the natural world, and really proving all the things that for so long have been part of mystery, mysticism, spirituality. And I think that's what I liked about what you said about, or what I read, brief thing I read about Robert Boyle, that he took what was previously more alchemy and really created the science out of it. So I'm always trying to figure out, how am I perceiving something, and how can I capture what I'm perceiving and then give that energy through my paintings and through the colors, of course, that I'm experiencing, really the light waves that I'm experiencing. And really, your work is so fabulous. I just...
Thanks very much. I think what's very interesting about reading something or reading about somebody, books that have been written in this time, about somebody who lived so far back, I think what, and I wondered this, so I spoke to a historian of science, is we don't really know what their world was like, you know, so the one thing she said to me that was important to remember is that at that time in the 17th century, everything was supernatural, you know, so little was explained. Like, there's so much we know now and we take for granted and we learn from kids, but everything back then was supernatural. And the Royal Society was a religious organization, essentially, wasn't it, Paul? It was.
Yeah, well, very, very much. The learned society was very much linked with the clergy.
Yeah.
They were the learned people. Yeah.
and then the layperson was just dealing with these gods and demons and humors and, you know, all sorts of, you know, there was very little sense, I suppose, you know. So it's interesting to read his work knowing that, you know.
Yeah, but I think that the nature of science is always an understanding at the moment. Now, obviously, we know an awful lot more, and we have more tools and methodology, and we communicate more. It's easier to communicate, but the nature of science is always changing, and at any one stage, this is our best understanding of what we think is going on. It's never a case of this is definitively what's going on, and it is always open to discussion and new information. On Saturday, I spoke about the speed of light, which we think is in the order of 300 million meters every second, and we don't think there's any speed faster than that. But a couple of years ago, there was some Italian physicists who were working on neutrinos. Now, neutrinos are subatomic particles which are neutral, they don't have any charge, and they are incredibly hard to detect. But they were doing experiments on neutrinos, and they thought that their data was suggesting that these neutrinos were traveling faster than the speed of light.
Wow.
And this caused a little bit of a, you know, a problem. In other words, everything would have to be rethought. And they put it out to the scientific community exactly what they were doing and the experiments that they were doing, and they put it out to the labs all over the world to recreate their experiment. So this is the open nature, I suppose, of science now. And nobody was able to recreate the readings that they had. So they went back and they checked everything, and they found that they had a couple of loose cables. And that was it. But
that's a bummer.
Well, I think they were happy that they got to the bottom of it. But it was surprising that it was so simple. But, you know, I tell the story in that, you know, there are many things that are still not understood by science. And when I work with students, they sometimes think that science is very definitive and this is the way, and it's a closed book, and that there's no, and as I mentioned on Saturday, to actually say exactly what light is a huge question that nobody really knows. Well, we have theories that describe how light behaves, and we can use those to very good effect with fiber optics and photoelectric and solar cells, and mankind and technology has really captured all that. But fundamentally, to answer the fundamental questions, what is light, is still not fully answered.
That's so wonderful, fascinating.
Yeah. So in a sense, I know how Robert Boyle, you know, worked, and there was a community, and going back to Newton, by all accounts, he borrowed a lot of other people's work, including Hooke's, who was assistant to Robert Boyle, and indeed Robert Boyle's work, and he claimed them as his own inventions and discoveries. But even at that time, they were snapshots of the current thinking. And the question of alchemy is a really interesting one. You could easily understand how how people of the day working in labs would love to take a base metal like iron and make gold out of it, Newton ended up working in the Royal Mint, and I wonder was that connected with his desire to take base metal and make it shiny gold and worthwhile. And throughout the ages, this has been a quest. And to an extent, elements have been changed from one to another. So new particles have been created in big laboratories such as CERN in Geneva, but they're elements that are quite close to each other. Taking something like iron and making it gold is a very large step.
I think, though, that when we speak about alchemy, you can speak about it in more abstract or metaphorical terms, and I think it's a useful mechanism in those ways. There is the idea that a painter's art is an alchemical art. We've all felt shivers up our spines when a singer hits that note or creates an atmosphere in a room, and there's something alchemical happening there, I believe, so I do think that the terms and the of the Philosopher's Stone and all those terms of calcination, distillation, you can use all those terms in a very real way, but not necessarily taking a lead and making it gold.
Right.
Not physically doing that. So yeah, it certainly makes for good imagery. One of my favorite images are those distillation containers that they used with all their sort of round bodies and long spouts. They were very interesting looking labs.
Yeah. Oh, this was so wonderful to hear your talk. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. And Nuala, I hope I get there soon. If not this year, then definitely next year.
Yes, I hope so.
Yes. Paul, thank you so much.
No problem. You're very welcome.
If I had been in Ireland, I would have come to your workshop for sure. But I'm glad I at least got to hear a little bit and see your beautiful work.
Thanks. All right. Well, we'll see you around.
Take good care.
Great.